afterwards. Let me just stop sharing for just a moment. Okay, looks like we're good. Okay, so here we are. Welcome, welcome. You've reached the very last required workshop for this fall. In the spring, if you are teaching a section, you will be meeting with Emmy directly, and you'll be consulting with me whenever you need to. So we're just going to jump right in to our slows. So these are the slows, as you've seen, for our class. There are 9 of them. Every 3-year cycle, we assess for 3 different slows, although we do persist in keeping project analysis as one of them, and then we rotate in 2 others every 3-year cycle. And project analysis is included as that sustained one because it has to do with the global, diverse, and multicultural audiences. And because I believe, and I think we all believe, that there is no universal user, if you know what I mean. Like, universal usability is kind of a spurious concept, especially when diverse populations have specific needs emerging out of their own community contexts. So I really believe that we need to teach students to be savvy to those differences and understand from a community participatory perspective the communication needs that are most beneficial to those communities. So that was pretty cumbersomely put. And I was like, oh, somebody's going to ask me about universal design for learning because I just said there is no universal usability, but we can talk about that another time. So I don't know if any of you remember where these slows came from. If you remember where they came from, you can unmute yourself and just chime in.
They were built in collaboration with, I can't recall the name, but I know they were built in collaboration with someone important.
Someone important. I love that. Let's see. I think Trisha just said hi, everyone. They came from the Society for Technical Communication, and that is indeed an important organization. Craig Baer is a professor at Texas Tech and a elected officer. I don't know what his role is within the STC, but he is a TPC professor, and he did actually get his PhD here at UNM. But he developed these in collaboration with other people because they are the principles that are the foundation level competencies in the STC credentialing exam. So they have 3 levels of this certification, and this is for the base level, the entry level certification exam. So along with my colleague Joe Bartolotta, we revised the slows for our 2210 classes to align with the STC because we figured if these are the habits and practices that are actually prevailing in industry, they're probably pretty good ones to make foundational within our curriculum. Although we took the terminologies as they existed in the STC version and we made them more appropriate for academia. So that is where they came from. You may wonder, we all wonder this all the time, how do we make sure we address these all in 16 weeks? Well, the reflection is a big component of improving the chances that some of these stick over the length of a course. So this is the menu of the assignments that exists in the class. And you've seen this before. I've just recreated it in this slide. And across whatever array of assignments you choose to have your students do, they're going to hit on all 9 of those slows. I believe that the way that many of us teach 2210 does a pretty good job of making sure that the slows are relatively top of mind throughout the semester because the students are doing all different kinds of reflecting. And in fact, when you are teaching in a face-to-face classroom, There's lots of in-class activities that you can do to make sure that you're kind of weaving the slows through class days on a regular basis by having students do little writing or media collaborative assignments where the slows are actually taken on explicitly, rather than just assuming that students are going to remember them as they're going through. You might think that's a little bit heavy-handed, but in fact, the more that they grapple with what they are, turning to them, the more they understand that they're elemental in the work that people do in the field. So back to the assignment menu, you all know this because you had to consider this for your actual application, but you are going to choose from this menu in order to constitute your major writing assignments. And above all, these MWAs end up emerging in the final portfolio. I think Emmy's talked about this before, and we've mentioned it in other events, that the portfolio isn't an afterthought. The portfolio is a forethought. Like, it happens at the very beginning of the class, and it is, for some people, just kind of a repository for all of this information. But I know that I think Emmy takes it on very explicitly as its own genre. So in a way, it becomes like an MWA4, because you are working on it as a repository and as a meta genre throughout the class. That's why it's very important, even though it's listed down here as plus at the bottom, to foreground that at the start. And you're actually going to be doing it, I would say, in a more meaningful way than you do in 1110 or 1120, because it is a phenomena that exists in the real world of technical communication. So here are the categories that we choose from. I have the items that I use with asterisks before them. One type of transactional communication, and I use an instructions procedures. Most people do. The first thing that they assign in the class is the instructional video. And I have to say, I love assigning that. And I know, Trisha, you've taught technical writing at other institutions. I don't know whether the instructional video was an old chestnut at those places too, but it's pretty de rigueur here in our curriculum. And let's see here. But I will tell you, I refer to these instructional videos all the time, and Emmy can probably speak to this. You learn so many things from your students. It's actually quite enlivening and enjoyable. Then the next thing is the correspondence and the job information materials. You can do these in combination, or you all know, because I've mentioned it in other workshops, that I do a kind of conglomeration assignment where I do a complaint and a response letter, and I do a social media series. The social media series requires a lot of hand-holding, so you may or may not want to do that. Sorry, I was sick all last week, so I'm trying to get through a cough. And then the research-based technical report. So this is an extensive proposal report with an in-person or multimodal presentation. Some people do this just as a presentation, but it has to have all of the research background that would constitute a feasibility study, a recommendations report, or some other kind of report. But I actually have them do both. Whoa. Sorry, you can't see me, but I just dropped my water. Okay, so those are the major writing assignments that I assign. And then, of course, they're all brought together in the portfolio. And in addition, we have this resume and bio or personal statement that goes on the landing page of the portfolio. I teach the resume and the bio statement at the end of the semester. They are a discussion board in my class that is worth basically double what the other discussion boards are worth, but then they get feedback on it from their colleagues. You can integrate the bio and the resume wherever you want in the class, but they should be on top of these other things that are required in the class. If you think it would be a good kind of icebreaker, a good opening moment to do the resume and the bio at the beginning, you can do that. If you have a theme-based class, like some people do, where they say everybody in this class is part of an organization, and you're doing it in a very entrepreneurial way, which our textbook actually really lends itself to. You could set up the resume and bio personal statement as a part of that imagined scenario within your class as an organization. That's up to you, wherever you want to put that. Okay, so continuing on with the SLOs, we are assessing 2, 5, and 6 this year again. And so we want to make sure that the students really address these thoroughly in their final course reflection memo. I tell my students to address all 9 SLOs, but they actually do it in a rather thin way. But they have to address 2, 5, and 6 in a more developed fashion. As you probably saw in the core writing email that just went out this last week, you have to submit 9 portfolios for 1110, 1120, X and Y, and 2210 and 2120. So when we get those portfolios and we're doing our own internal assessment, we're looking at the final reflection memos for attention to these 3. And then we have a team of assessors, when we have funding to do that, and we assess how students are performing on these 3. And if you're interested in learning more about how we do that assessment, I'm happy to tell you about it. But the reason why you have to turn in 9 is because the university has its own assessment arm, and they assess all the core curriculum classes out of that office. So sometimes we do our own, and that's why the 3 here are emphasized, because those are for our own assessment. Those aren't for the university-wide assessment. Those are for our own assessment. Okay, but the $1,000,000 question is this. How does writing about the areas of focus and using them as the skeleton of our class actually correlate to proven student learning? So like, what is the relationship between teaching to outcomes and student learning? Like, I don't really have an answer to this. I mean, there's obviously tons of research and writing studies about the relationship between an outcomes-based curriculum and actual learning that can be determined through assessment. But as you might imagine, given that we have 20 to 25 sections of 2210, we have a variety of levels of success across those sections and within everyone's own course, right? Like, you can be an excellent teacher, but that doesn't guarantee that all of your students are going to learn at a certain level, because there's so many other variables. But does the architecture, or does the skeleton of the SLOs actually help ensure that there's certain benchmarks that we meet in 2210? I think that they do help us achieve certain benchmarks, but this is one of those big picture questions in writing studies. So I just put it out there because I think sometimes we don't explicitly engage with it and think about it seriously when we're doing our course design. Like, are these just hoops that Dr. Newmark is putting out there that we have to make sure that we have, that we're complying, or are we actually using them in meaningful ways in our teaching? So that's for you to actually mull over and see how you're going to operationalize in your own course design. Okay, so here's an overview of how I teach the course. And this workshop today is really crucial for those of you who are just about to do this. And I'll be talking to you all in the next few weeks who are actually assigned sections by Dee. And then the work really begins for those of you who did get sections for the spring to bring your class together. You can work with me, you can work with Emmy. Emmy is our 2210 liaison. She has experience. She knows what to do to help you bring this together. And I'm going to give you a peek into how I design my course today. And then Emmy's going to tell you a little bit more in the second half of the presentation about how she works towards achieving some of her learning goals in her class. So I teach 3 main projects tied to specific SLOs, 3 per project, plus a portfolio. You all know that. I go over all of the SLOs from the beginning of the semester. And I discuss the portfolio, the final course reflection, the resume bio in weeks 1 and 2. I have readings throughout the course, videos. I'm not shy about recording little videos every now and then to help my students. And I record a lot of videos that have prior students' work in them that I've gotten permission to share. Don't share it if you haven't gotten permission to share. And that's just in an email. Like, you just have to be able to have an email from a student that says, yes, I give you permission to share this, if anybody were to ever ask you. But I do that because students are very comforted by seeing how somebody else prior to them produced the output that you're looking for. I have quizzes in my online classes. I don't use them in my face-to-face classes, but I do use them in my online classes. I have discussion boards. Sometimes in an in-person class, I have students do some outlining exercises in class, but I also address the fact that outlines don't work for everybody. It depends on your composition style. For me, for example, I'm what's called a heavy reviser rather than a heavy planner. I do a lot of just jumping in and writing and then doing heavy revision afterwards. So I talk about the writing process as attached to this concept of outlining, which will resonate with them because they probably are familiar with this from 1110 and 1120, the invention process. So we do peer review drafts, reflections, memoranda, etc. So the final portfolio, the final course reflection, and the resume and the bio statement come at the end. I have them write all of their reflections as memoranda, and there's examples in the textbook of how to do this. The quizzes help ensure that they actually did the readings. And you can quiz them not only over the readings, but over things that happen in course videos if you included them, or like when are your office hours, things like that, to make sure that they read the course materials. And that's especially important in the online classes. You are supposed to encourage multimodality in this 2210 curriculum because we are a multimodal curriculum throughout our core writing program. So in your discussion boards and in journals, if you use them, these can be videos instead of text-based. They can be podcasts. They can be, I actually ask my students to hand draw me things from time to time. So whatever other modality you want to employ to help them learn that discourse practices like operate across valences is a good strategy, because technical communication isn't just a black font on a white page. Come on, slideshow. Okay. All right. So MWAs, you know, Tyler Mortensen Hayes was my previous 2210 liaison. He was before Emmy, and he stuck with a pretty strict 5-5-5 breakdown of the semester with 1 week at the end for the portfolio. I don't do that. My design is more of a 4, it says 3, 4, or 5, but I actually 4 weeks for the first assignment, and then 3 weeks for the middle one, and about 5 weeks for the last one, and then whatever weeks are left over, in this case, that would be 3 weeks, would be dedicated to the portfolio. I find that creating more space at the end of the semester enables them to create a better product in the portfolio. And it enables them to have more time for revision, because we are expecting them to revise throughout, because they're always turning in a peer review draft and they get feedback and then they revise. But in my 2210 classes that are 16 weeks, I have them do a mandatory additional revision of one project. And that's what I spend time on in the 2 or 3 weeks at the end of the semester that I've saved by making some of the units smaller. So don't feel that you have to do 5-5-5 plus 1 for the portfolio. You divide that up however works for your class based on the intensity of the various assignments. So I have the instructional video, and it's associated with these 3 slows. I have the complaint response letters with social media component with the slows listed there, and the proposal that has these the proposal, report, and presentation. And so at the end of each project, a memorandum of reflection on the associated slows occurs. And then I also have them do, actually, this isn't right. I need to revise this. So what I have them do is they do a memorandum. This is going to be confusing if you've never taught in this. So I'm sorry, I'll correct this. I have them do a project reflection memo. And the project reflection memo is where they focus on audience and purpose. It actually has three parts. It's the first part is audience, the second part is purpose, and the third part is what do you want your instructor to know about your journey through this assignment? It's just like their opportunity to tell you what worked for them, what didn't, and all that. So that is itself a memorandum that gets attached to the page on their portfolio, wherever they are included in the body text. And then the items on the portfolio website that are the 9 slows, they then write a reflective paragraph for the 3 slows that are pertinent to that assignment. So those are not memoranda, at least in my class. You could do it that way. They're just like a paragraph about each slow. And as Emmy has said before, if they were using this portfolio for a workplace scenario, they would take all the slow content out because their prospective employer doesn't care that they can reflect on student learning outcomes. They just care about the actual output. So that is something that is absolutely part of the architecture of our class, is the slow reflections. So we can talk more about that because that does get really confusing. And I have to tell you, when I came to UNM 8 years ago, and I don't know if Tricia feels this way because she's been at other universities before this, and some of you others have too. I felt like the way that we used the slows was pretty idiosyncratic, and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, we're teaching which ones where and how. So I'm not going to come down on you because I'm surveilling your class if you're doing it in a different way. I just want to make sure that you're teaching to them and that you're having the students reflect on them. You do that however you think works best for your class. And you may be basing that on research that you've done in the pedagogy of teaching technical communication, or you might be doing it based on your own experience, but make sure they're reflecting on slows in some way. Okay, so this is how Tyler Mortensen Hayes broke up his first MWA unit. I did just keep this in there because on the next slide, I'm going to show you mine. So this is how he introduced the topic via the assignment prompt, the textbook readings and videos. He had a small writing assignment to help them choose a topic. He showed previous students examples, and then he ended the week with a quiz. The next week was more readings and a discussion board about audience analysis, genre analysis, and research ideas, and then another quiz. Week 3 was a reading, and then a media lab. I'm sorry for coughing in your ear. And then another quiz. And week 4 was a reading, peer review discussion board, and a quiz. And week 5 was the SLOWS discussion board, the final project draft, and then the reflection memorandum. And actually, that's probably, rather than the final project draft, that's probably actually the final project submission there. So that's how that's broken out in 5 weeks. But this is my first 2 weeks of the class, and this is for a, I break it down. This isn't an online class, but I still do put days of the week in there just to help them organize their time. They don't obviously have to do everything on these days, but when there's something due, they have to have it due on that day. First day of the semester, blah, blah, blah. Friday, here are all the readings they're supposed to do. Sunday, the quizzes that they need to do. Monday of week 2, they read the assignment for the first major project, and then they watch a video that I created that was about the project. That Wednesday they do more reading, and I guess this was an in-person class. So then they talk about the chapter 7 in class, and then I have in my in-person 2210s, I have these small assignments called SWAAs, which are small writing and analysis assignments. And so these are scattered in because they're not doing discussion boards because it's a in-person class. So I have this other thing that I just created. This is to indicate that you can create things too. If you have unique pedagogical flourishes that you think work to benefit your students and keep them honest and on top of their work, then you add those in. And then Friday, this is what I have for the second week. So you can see I very carefully break it up each day of each week. Okay, so and now we're going to move on to Emmy, but I do want to pause because Emmy's going to move in a somewhat different direction by diving deeply into one of our slows. And everything I've done over the last half hour has related to how to set up your class and what you should do in a general sort of overview fashion. So I do want to pause right here and give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions that you have. Andrew.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. I know you can't see me, which is probably disorienting, but go right ahead.
All right. So how set is the order for the semester? Between those three categories, do we need to go in, like start with transactional communication, then do the correspondence, and then do the research-based projects? Or is it
No,
more open?
no, that's a really good question. Excuse me again. I'm really sorry for all my coughing and everything, but I'm sure we can relate. I know some of the others of you have been sick this semester too, but so let's say that you are doing a thematic class, you know, like your class is an organization, or you have a series of little teams in your class, or however you design it, like, or you're all engaging with a particular problem. These would roll out in a different organic fashion based on what you needed to do per that design. I don't know how you would do the research-based report first. Like that's the only thing that I don't think you could do first, but everything else you could do in a different order. Does that make sense, Andrew? Yes. Okay, sounds good. Okay, Cody.
Okay, I have two questions. So the first, can we get access to the textbook early?
Yes, you can go in to see Susan McAllister, our assistant for core writing, and she can give you a hard copy.
Oh, okay, great. And then does 2210 require student conferences?
Yes, it
Or is
does.
that just a core writing? Okay.
Yeah, it is because it is part of core writing. And so that is not one of our rules from in-house necessarily. That comes from the Associate Provost for Student Success, I think is that title. And that was a high impact practice that was enforced early in COVID. And then we've had to continue with it. So those have to happen by the end of week 5, I think. Emmy, do you remember? I think it's the end of week 5.
Yeah, I think I think it's week 5 or week 6, something like that.
Yeah, so, and if you have a face-to-face class, you can, you know, carve out time from your week in week 5 or 6 to meet with your students, because I know you guys are all really busy. So you can just be like, this is conference week. That's what we're doing this week. And you just have to do it the one time. If you're in an online class, then just make sure that you have a light schedule in the week that, you know, light for them and light for you. Does that make sense, Cody?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, what other questions do you all have about just the general rules and regulations and things? Nothing. Okay, Emmy, it is on to you, and I will click through whenever you tell me to click.
Okay, perfect. So what we're going to focus on today is kind of broadening our pedagogical goals for SLO2, which is the Global Diverse and Multicultural Audiences project analysis. So I put it in this presentation so that if you guys needed to go back to it, you could, but obviously, project analysis is identifying a document's readers and a document's context relative to practices of composing for specific global, diverse, and multicultural audiences. And we want our students to understand how these documents occupy and respond to social justice and community service contexts. So if you could click to the next one, Julie. So what I wanted to kind of talk about is how outcomes
Right
kind of
one. Sorry, Emmy, did I
yeah.
jump ahead too much, or am I on the right one?
Oh, you're on the right one.
Okay,
You're
sorry about
perfect.
that. Sorry to
No,
interrupt.
you're so good. So outcomes are something that, as Julie mentioned, they're used for assessment, and they're also used for reflection within the course. So the outcomes are kind of, if you could think about learning as like a really messy kind of nonlinear line, outcomes are kind of signposts that we have for students as we go through a semester, right? And as they're learning kind of, accelerates or decelerates, or, they have their learning journey with us for the time of a semester. And they're also things that they communicate. It's a way for students to communicate to things like assessors in programmatic assessment. And so it's important that we as instructors have an idea of these outcomes, it's important that we build them into the way that we are kind of structuring our course. So if we could go to the next one now, Julie. So this is where threshold concepts and a little bit of backward design comes in. And so the question that I have for you is, what do we do when we have an outcome that doesn't have specific parameters to have students achieve said outcomes? So like I said, outcomes are kind of signposts on a student's learning journey, and the pedagogy, or like what you create as far as materials for these students, is something that will build them toward achieving those outcomes. Something else that I want to emphasize, though, and something that I emphasize for my students, is that outcomes are also not something that with each project they have to necessarily perfectly achieve. So students can speak frankly or write frankly about where they are in their learning journey with a particular outcome. So it could be that, they are working with content development, but they're struggling in this area. They're struggling to organize as they go, or something like that. And that type of authentic reflection, I think, is what is actually valuable, not only to students, but to us as instructors, to truly authentically know where they are at any given point throughout the semester. But threshold concepts is something that I want to bring into the conversation about outcomes. I just gave you guys an article that you can look at from Boise State that goes deeper into it, but they are skills or knowledge that once known, a student won't be the same on their learning journey after they learn it. And they're things like an example of a threshold concept is something like rhetorical flexibility. So at the end of your course, hoping that a student has the rhetorical flexibility to be able to understand what is expected of them in a lab report versus an instructional video, for example. And that's something that is, once students understand, like once a student has rhetorical flexibility and has that skill, it's something that they won't really easily unlearn. It's something that they can apply to work past or beyond professional and technical communication. So Julie, if you could go to the next slide. So the project that I'm going to focus on in terms of thinking through these threshold concepts in terms of SLO2 is the proposal. And I just put the topic and the blurb about the assignment from, I think this probably is yours, Julie, and I got it, trickled down through different grad students. But this is the project that you don't have to teach this, obviously, but I want us to kind of be thinking about the proposal in terms of an SWA that we will create a learning objective for at the end of this presentation. So I just put it here again for you all to have, to easily reference. Okay, Julie, next slide. Let's see. So when we think about these outcomes and these threshold concepts, I want us to end today with a course objective or an objective for a small writing assignment, a learning objective. So I put this in: writing can be thought of as disciplinary practice and embodiment of how people think within a discipline, instead of it just being just like thinking on a page for students. So something that I think English 2210 does really well, that I think you know, builds students towards having this skill outside of academia, outside of their undergraduate education, is helping students to start to think about what they produce within classes as an embodiment of how they are thinking as someone working within a discipline. So within the proposal assignment, obviously this is an assignment where the form is something that students can replicate, right? Once they learn how to create a funding proposal, it's something that they can create funding proposals in different contexts, but we're also asking them to act as active community members in this assignment. And we're specifically kind of wanting them to develop cultural literacy skills, right? And so I'm asking, how can we prompt students to engage with this assignment with this identity in mind, which is an identity of someone who is actively engaged in their community and actively thinking of ways to improve their community, right? So it's like, so something to kind of get to get your mind going is like, what skills do you want your students to have after this project that can translate into other fields and disciplines, and what sorts of knowledge is obtained through this engagement? So maybe let's go to the next slide. Let's see. Yeah, so and that kind of, so I guess we'll pause right there. Let's actually go back. Sorry, Julie. And can any of you say or what you think?
Hang on a second. Sorry. Go back. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, right there. Yeah. So I want you guys to answer this question of like, what skills do you want your students to have after either after the proposal, where they are kind of asked to engage in community, in their community in a very specific way. Trisha?
The first thing that comes to mind is, well, they would need to understand their audience to be persuasive.
Yeah.
So whatever they're writing in their proposal must address all members of their intended audience.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Okay, so like audience analysis is maybe like an important skill that they would get from this. What else? And can anyone think of a skill that they would get from actively engaging in their community? And what kind of literacy skills they might obtain from that aspect of the assignment?
Maybe like observational skills of being able to look around and see what's an issue in their community. Like you can't say there's a hole in the road without being able to see it in the first place.
Yeah, so observationals. So being an active observer of their communities or their discourse communities even. What else?
I think communicating clearly is something in technical writing that's very important. And I don't know if it's just part of being in academia, but people tend to get kind of caught up in jargon and trying to sound like they're, I don't know, that I don't know, like there's a habit of saying more than you need to. And being clear and concise is being courteous to your reading audience.
Yeah, I feel like something that professional technical communication does as well is focusing on accessibility of language over, I guess, maybe other values that are in other disciplines. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So threshold concepts offer a mechanism for faculty to articulate the content of their courses, identify student learning throughout the course experience, and create shared values for writing in a way that a focus on end products, on outcomes cannot. So my kind of proposal to you is to incorporate a threshold concept into your understanding of each outcome. And that could be like a goal that you have like before, even like before really structuring your course out or fleshing it out, you could go through each outcome and try to create an SWA or a course objective that relates back to that student learning outcome. So we're going to focus on SLO2 today. And I want us to think about, and you can kind of do this individually, of a threshold concept that aligns with this outcome. So one threshold concept that I think does align with this outcome is actually rhetorical flexibility, right? Understanding what it means for the student to produce, you know, this proposal as a concerned community member or as an active community member, and understanding where, you know, in a different context, maybe if they were like in a job, how the execution of the proposal might look different or might not, right? Maybe that cultural literacy skill that they develop in this project would translate over to their job. That's the hope, right? And then the next thing, the second question is, what does the outcome omit related to that threshold concept? So whatever the concept is that you want your students to kind of take away from the project overall, how does it relate to the outcome? And then I also want you to kind of think about where there's gaps, because those gaps are going to be where, like, what you imagine into in terms of creating a course objective. So I hope that this makes sense. Are there any questions before we get into our brainstorming of these questions?
I'm sorry, could you just like define the idea of threshold concept a bit clearer, please?
So a threshold concept is something that our students will take away from whatever it is that we taught them that can apply to their other learning that they do on campus. So an example of a threshold concept. So for example, like the threshold concept of having students think within a discipline, right? And understanding that writing is actually them thinking within a discipline and reflecting, you know, the values within a discipline. That's a threshold concept. Another threshold concept that I think is really applicable to 2210 is forms as something that reflects values within like our within different cultural contexts. So like a resume is a form that reflects different values that are present in job searching, you know, committees or whatever that is. And so it's something like larger that you want your students to kind of take away from a project that addresses SLO2. Does that make sense, Cody?
I think so. The SLOs, I guess, could be threshold concepts then, in a sense, right?
Well, they're outcomes. So the idea is that the threshold concept is something that's a little bit more like it's not class specific per se. It's something like rhetorical flexibility is important for 2210, but it's not something that's necessarily like, it's not an outcome in the sense that like how do you assess whether a student has rhetorical flexibility when you can't see inside their head, and like see that they're understanding what they need to do for a lab report versus an instructional video. Does that make sense? Here, Lauren West.
And Lauren just put something in the
Yes.
chat.
The guardian is a child.
Are making me think of threshold guardians and the hero's journey, where the guardian is a challenge the hero has to face to be able to continue their journey, but to get past them, the hero has to learn something that will continue helping them in their journey further on.
I feel like that's a really valid way to think about it, Lauren. Yes. Like I like that a lot.
Can I ask a question too?
Yes.
How would you relate it to another resonant term in the discipline, which is transfer? Like
Yeah, transferable skills. Right?
Yeah. Can you speak to the difference? Because I'm not, these are kind of buzzwordy sort of concepts among pedagogues, like you're not going to talk to your students probably
Yeah.
about threshold concepts or
No.
transfer. But like, how do we weave those together? Like can you speak to the difference, or do you think they're just kind of different terminologies for the same things?
Well, see, yeah, I don't feel like I'm actually that familiar with the term well, I know transferable skills, but I guess in my head, and Julie, I might be wrong so about this because I don't fully I've never, or I don't think about transferable skills too often, but I feel like a threshold concept is a little bit more like something that students really have to understand. Like once they understand, okay, yeah, I am, even though I'm a student at UNM, I am going to be creating documents as a scientist or as whatever it is. Like that's something that students really have to understand. Like once they understand it, they can't really come back. But I feel like transferable skills, yeah, I feel like transferable skills are more like something that could be lost over time. Like it's like a genuine skill. Does that make sense?
I think one way, like just to get to what Cody was asking too.
Yeah.
The way you described it was really key. It's like when a baby learns to walk, they're not going to unlearn that. That is the threshold. They have passed that threshold. Like if you think about a threshold literally as something like, when the old very sort of stereotypical marriage adage of somebody carrying somebody else over the threshold, it's like into a new identity and into a new place, into a new relationship. So a threshold concept is a concept that helps you cross a threshold into a new place. And you have it. You don't lose it because you have it.
Yes. And like one final thing I'll say, which may also relate to some of you, is I was watching this climbing, I don't even climb, but I was watching a climbing documentary, and these climbers would there's so many different ways that a climber could get to a certain point in their journey where they have to kind of leap over something and like a threshold. And once they leap over that threshold, they can keep going up and ascend. But it's kind of like, I feel like the learning journey or the climbing journey can look different for each student. But then once they pass, they pass the guardian, I guess for Lauren's example, there is kind of no going back. So I hope that makes sense. And it doesn't have to be perfect. The whole objective of me even telling you about this is to get you to tease out your understanding of the student learning outcome so that you can have a viable course objective. Does that make sense? For your students, that comes from you and your pedagogy. Okay, so let's take about, how long should they take, Julie? Do you think?
Let's see. Maybe 10 minutes.
Okay. That sounds good to me. So let's take about 10 minutes to think through these questions, and then we'll come back together and see what everyone came up with.
Would you mind putting SLO2 up?
Oh, I'll pull it up.
Perfect.
Let me just actually paste it in the chat so you can still have this on the screen. I won't be able to copy, but it's project analysis. If you just want to jot down identifying a document's readers and a document's context relative to practices of composing. This is the key part for specific global, diverse, and multicultural audiences. Understanding how technical documents occupy and respond to social justice and community contexts.
I found it.
Okay,
So we can go.
there we are. Are we good? Okay, so everybody can take 10 minutes on this. I'll set a timer, Emmy.
Thank you. I'm also looking at the time.
Hi, everybody. It's been 10 minutes. Emmy, do you think that's enough?
Yeah. Yes, I do. I think that's perfect. Can we come back together? And I'll just ask if anyone wants to share what they came up with.
I can.
Okay.
So for my threshold concept, I said that it was that different cultures have different methods and modes of communicating / composing, and to reach them, you need to change how you might write. So basically, the students would need to be able to understand that other cultures are different from their own, and so maybe watch a video of like British people react to whatever's normal for us. Just to sort of break them out of that. And so the shorthand of that is just empathy for other cultures and broadening horizons so that people who are kind of stuck in their bubble, students who are stuck in their bubble here, kind of get that larger global scale of understanding. And then that the thing it's emitting in the student learning outcome is that we need to research those cultural differences. How would we actually go about learning about these different people and places if we're not able to travel for whatever reason or watch enough YouTube videos in a day? No idea. So course objective is students will learn, students will research another culture's modes of communication to better understand the global scope of communication and replicate those modes for their intended audience.
That's so great, Lauren. And it's great to hear also you're already thinking of like a smaller writing assignment that could build towards this goal. That's great. Is there anyone else who has anything that I want to share?
I didn't get completely finished with it, but I started to think about assignments maybe that would come close to this threshold concept. And I started thinking about, I used to do a letter that was filled with idioms and crazy things that multicultural other countries, non-native speakers would not understand. And I had students, it was a real letter. So like I actually brought in a letter from someone that wrote this. You know, I actually brought in like a real business letter. I think it actually might have been a university, but anyway. And I had them revise it and we talked about it. I don't know how, I'm trying to figure out how that would fit here. And then I also thought, I also like to teach about forwarding email. And, you know, there's a primary audience, a secondary audience, but then there's like the unanticipated audience, right? And so I always want to tell students, you have to, especially in email, because they get forwarded and people hit reply and, you know, it's just, you never know where it's going to end up. As like I said, I wasn't quite getting to there, but that's, I don't know if I was thinking along the right lines or not.
I think you are. And I think, I mean, and also it sounds like you're thinking of the ways that like the materials you already have kind of build to goals that you have for your students already, right? I think that your letter idea is really cool because it brings, maybe the threshold concept could be something like, it's like an awareness. Yeah, there's something that they're learning about, being aware of like the impact of their words, maybe like, or the impact of even their biases on a document and how that can be misunderstood.
Sure.
I think. Yeah, that's really cool.
I was gonna say something, but then I ended up coughing. If we wanted to turn what Trisha offered into something a little bit more pithy, it would be like localized language. You know, like that's the concept. That once you understand that all language is local, however you define local, then you're able to cross that threshold into being more sensitive to that particular thing. Am I making that too simple?
No, I think that makes sense.
That's perfect. Is there anyone else who wants to share?
I have an SWA that I think might hit. So like as I was thinking through this, I was thinking about like truly understanding what purpose and audience means, because even now teaching 1120, I feel it's too abstract, because the purpose for them is to get a good grade and they're writing to me. So putting that in a more global situation, I think is really important. So for an SWA, like giving them a topic and, I don't know, a letter that they have to write to their boss or something like that. But also like conveying that same information to a different audience. So presenting the same information with the idea that's going to two different audiences, like creating two different letters essentially with the same information, one going to your boss and the other going to, I don't know, like a local school or something like that.
Yeah, I think that that's a great, or that SWA hits for me. And so the threshold, did you articulate like a threshold concept for yourself, or do you have an idea of what you think it is?
I like the narrowest I could define it was like really understanding what it means, like what purpose and audience really means, and how your writing and design affect different audiences individually. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm still like overthinking this idea of threshold.
I think that, yeah, that's like a valid, I mean, yeah, because I think understanding purpose and understanding audience is a threshold concept. And I think that's why it's so hard. Like, it's like from 1110 to 2210, like audience analysis is something that we keep kind of hounding into our students. And I think too, something else that I do want to leave you with in thinking about threshold concepts is students aren't necessarily, just as like I said, that they're not necessarily going to achieve each outcome to the best of their ability within each individual project. If anything, looking at their outcomes at the very end of the semester, like, is useful, or not. Like, they could, move on from our class and just still not understand something, like in terms of outcomes. I think threshold concepts work in a similar way, but threshold concepts also, like, let's say you teach 1110 and you teach a student so well that one of them really does understand audience analysis. That's only going to benefit further instructors of that student, because we all kind of have threshold concepts also can connect, English, like audience analysis is important, yes, for us in core writing and like throughout the core curriculum, but it's also useful for students who are going to be writing lab reports in chemistry classes, right? Understanding audience within that context is equally as important. So I do think it is a threshold concept, and it's one that I think we all are constantly thinking about, because we're always trying to get them to effectively analyze their audiences. Okay. Is there anyone else who wanted to share?
I just wanted to say one more thing. When I think
Yeah.
of threshold, I think of like a door, where you walk through into another room. And I was thinking that, especially for this class, we're preparing students to write in their professional lives. So sometimes in feedback on a student document, I'll say, you're writing representing everyone at that company. So you have to be careful not to say this or this or this. And I'll also say that, especially early on, you might have supervisors or bosses or whatever looking at your stuff and they might send it, like I might say, if I were your boss, I might send this back and ask you to change these things. So I try to shape my feedback like almost as a supervisor or a boss would do. And I'm not sure it works for the door analogy, but I don't know if it works for this, but I just thought I would toss that in.
That is like behavior, that type of feedback directly kind of relates to that, to a threshold concept of having students, think about writing more as, you know, something that they do within a discipline, right? So I think that actually is like really a good way to kind of structure feedback and to also keep some cohesion throughout the class, right? I think that's really, and also you're still like admitting that you're their instructor. You're just saying, if I was, you know, hypothetically, right? In this rhetorical situation, right? That's great. Okay, well, I think that's it. And if no one else wants to share, Julie, that's all I have for you guys today.
And thank you so much to Emmy for introducing that concept. I mean, I think the longer you stay in writing studies, people conceive of different ways for instructors to strategize, you know, getting their students from point A to point B, right? So this is a strategy. This is a way, and as it said in that quote you shared, Emmy, let's see if I can bring it back up here. A mechanism for faculty to articulate. Like this, as I said before, like this is not vocabulary your students even need to know, but these are the concepts that undergird your teaching. So like, what are the threshold concepts that are the mechanisms or the vehicles that help you get from the articulation curricularly of our SLOs to the learning that you want them to achieve? So, and Lauren just posted some things in our chat, a YouTube link, and then this is the business vlog I mentioned last workshop, and this video is one where they goofed a lot on how to phrase marketing. So you can look into those if you wish. Thank you, Lauren. And I'm going to conclude because, as I said, I have to run, and I don't think you guys will be upset if we finish a few minutes early. But I will reach out to you if you are assigned 2210 for the spring. Not all of you were assigned that course for the spring, and I have to tell you that I am not responsible for those decisions. I conveyed to our scheduler that you were all eligible, and then she works her magic from there based on a lot of factors. And the biggest factor is who is in the grad program and needs, you know, within their TA-ship, needs this additional skill to flesh out their repertoire of teaching, because that's part of graduate students training in our program. So that is one of the things that Dee Dee uses to prioritize assignment. It has nothing to do with anybody's skill or preparedness, because you've not taught this class before, so you can't prove your skill and efficacy in teaching it yet. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit. In January, well, prior to January, you'll be hearing from me about your course assignments, and you'll see it in the schedule of classes. And then you can reach out to me if you want any support while you're developing your course materials. If you didn't get assigned a section for spring, that doesn't mean that you'll never get assigned one. You know, we have other events coming up that you're welcome to come to, but you don't have to. You're now eligible. Now you will also be hearing from your 2210 liaison, which is Emmy. Those of you who are teaching it for the first time in spring, you should definitely avail yourself of Emmy's office hours, which she will be holding to support 2210 instructors. If you, in your first semester of 2210, want me to observe your class, I'm more than happy to do that. I don't want to volunteer Emmy to do it, but if you reach out to her nicely and, you know, give her cookies,
Yeah,
whatever.
I'm down.
Coffee.
I'm down to do observations.
But we will have office hours and mentorship opportunities in the spring. And then the workshop series restarts in the spring for brand new people who want to become eligible. So I'm pretty sure we're going to need to run them again in the spring, but we have to get a sense of what the need is first. But so on that note, I mean, I'm super distressed that my video wasn't working and I was not able to emote to you through my smiles and waves, but thank you for coming. And I will post this in the folder in Google Drive where all the other materials were. And then I hope you have a good rest of your semester, everybody. And I'm going to stop the recording and you all can log off. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.